Assalamu alaikum everyone, we'll get started inshallah. So alhamdulillah, thank you everyone for coming today for the Quran inspiration. I know last week Musa gave a very amazing talk about understanding why we read the Quran, why we want to even understand the Quran in the first place. And just in general, what's the purpose of you coming to this session? Why are you coming here? What do you gain to benefit from? Because it would be a waste of time for you to come here without having a certain goal and objective that you want to achieve at the end of this session, especially this is an informative session, not a social not a social event or anything like that. So we all came here for a certain goal, for a certain objective, to learn something. And what does that be about? The Qur'an. And what is the Qur'an? It's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to achieve in this life. It's our cheat sheet. It's our guide for this life so we can attain an even better reward, inshallah, in the hereafter. That's what the definition, that's what the Qur'an is and why we care so much about it. And it would be a shame on us, and it would be a disfavor towards ourselves and a displeasure for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we don't take the time to go and read on top of reading the Qur'an, but also understanding it. Understanding what it means in our lives. So that's why we do the Qur'an inspirations. And just, I want to go over a quick schedule on kind of what we usually do. Last year when we did the Quran inspirations, what we usually do is that I would read the Quran, read the surah itself, in Arabic initially, and then I would go quickly over the literal translation of the ayat, and then after that I'll go into each ayah and kind of its implication in our lives. What do we have to gain for it? Sounds good? Okay. So for today, I've been thinking whether how to do this, what surah I should choose, but I thought at least for the very first one, we should be Surah Al-Fatihah, and then towards the end of the session, I'll ask everyone here what kind of the format you want, or what kind of surahs you want to hear the tafsir of more often. Because we did a lot last year, we kind of went in order, but I'm not sure whether that's what everyone wants to, or is there any surahs specifically that you guys have in mind that you want to hear the tafsir of. But inshallah, I'll get started reading the Surah Al-Fatihah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Subhanallah al-Azim. So the literal translation of the ayat go as follows. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. The Compassionate, the Merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we return for help. Guide us on the straight path, the path on those whom you have bestowed your favors, not those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray. That's the literal translation of the surah. So before I go into the implication of each ayah and how it applies to us, I kind of want to give a general theme of what the surah is. I mean, this surah, everyone here must have learned it. Everyone here must have heard it. Everyone here says it 17 times a day minimum in their salawat. So why is this surah such a big deal in our lives? And it's because it contains a great deal of the central basic ideas of Islam. It contains the fundamentals, and it contains our beliefs and our concepts that we carry as Muslims. And it carries our perceptions that we have in our life, the attitudes we have to carry as well. And in the surah, it's recognizing the names and the characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our overall relationship with Him, or with Allah. And because of these reasons, it becomes very clear. I mean, honestly, give it 20 minutes for this Surah Al-Fatihah is not giving it justice at all whatsoever. But the more you look into the tafsir and understanding what Surah Al-Fatihah, what the meaning behind it and its implication in our lives, it really becomes really obvious why this surah was chosen to be such a frequent surah that we keep most on our lips. Okay, so the first ayah is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful. Ar-Rahman means the most compassionate. He's the most merciful. And the way it's stated in Arabic, Ar-Rahman, it encompasses all aspects of mercy. It can be only used in respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's containing every aspect that might be linked to mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman. And then we also use this, and then this whole phrase of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which I mean majority of us we always say it a lot, whether it's in Salah or outside of Salah, right? Before we do any action, what do we always do? We say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's acknowledging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and His compassion. And it actually kind of makes you think that anyone who fails to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when doing any of their actions, they start to just only remember about the fruits of their actions, not that this came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's compassion. And that's why the phrase Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is such a common phrase that we use amongst us, our Muslims. Because every aspect of our life, we always have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's compassion. And actually, in the hadith in Tirmidhi, where it says, shall I not inform you of the best of your actions, the purest in the sight of your Lord, which raises your rank to the highest, which is better for you than spending gold and silver, better than meeting your enemies so that you strike at their necks and they strike at yours? And they replied, yes, indeed. And the Prophet Muhammad said, it's the remembrance of Allah. Abu Hurairah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala please be pleased with him, narrated that the Prophet Muhammad said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I treat my servant as he hopes that I would treat him. I am with him whenever he remembers me. If he thinks of me, I think of him. If he mentions me in company, I mention him in even better company. If he draws near to me a handspan, I draw near to him an arm's length. And if he draws near to me an arm's length, I draw closer by a distance of 2 outstretched arms nearer to him. And if he comes to me walking, I go to him running. Which just shows the importance of constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any gathering you may be in, or by yourself as well, or any action you take. Because the more you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you realize that both the good and the bad are related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and compassion. And it keeps us constantly remembering, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I have this connection with Allah. And as we go on more during the surah, we realize that constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually really correlates a lot with the actions we do in our life. Keeping ourselves accountable. Keeping ourselves, because when you always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, when you wake up in the morning, if you're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll make sure that all your actions are according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. When you're going to school, if you keep yourself moist with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all your actions inshallah will follow suit. Because you realize, I have a connection with Allah. I'm not alone. I'm not stuck here in this society, among this group of friends, in this college, and I can just do whatever I want. So now the next ayah says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. So the very first part is saying praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the praising of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of every action is also another fundamental principle of Allah's of Islamic faith, because again, this sort of focuses a lot on the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our center of our lives. And then the Qur'an says, He is Allah, there is no God worthy of worship except Him. All praises belong to Him in this life and the next, and all authority is His, and to Him you all will be returned. So it's building off that the main focal point, the main focus you have is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the next part of this ayah talks about the Lord of all the worlds. So it expresses that what? The fundamental principle of Islam. That there's only what? One God, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He's the Lord of all the worlds. He is that center point. He had no beginning and no end. He is the Lord of all the worlds. He is the one that's worthy of worship, the one worthy of praise, the one that you center your life around. And this is a basic principle known as Tawheed. Tawheed is believing there is no God but Allah, and is the fundamental basis of Islam. And if we stutter in that, or don't feel confident in that idea, that's something we have to look into ourselves, and we also have to pursue a clarification on and figure out a solution for that. Because it really, Tawheed is the most fundamental principle of Islam. One of the basics, and it's really critical. But now, when we say He's the Lord of all the world, Lord of all the worlds, and we say that He is the only God worthy of worship, what is meant by worship? What is meant by worship, right? So I want to give two, I bring two hadith. I mean, not hadith, saying phrases in a hadith, in which we'll give a little bit of clarification on this. So Adi bin Hatim radiallahu anhu said that he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing a gold cross around his neck. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O Adi, throw away this idol from yourself." Then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the verse, "They, the Jews and Christians, took their rabbis and their monks to be their lords beside Allah." And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "It was not that they worshipped these people, but rather whatever they made permissible, for them, they believed it to be permissible. And whatever they forbade, they believed it to be unlawful." So this brings an interesting perspective. Is that in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that they took their rabbis and their monks as their lords. Which, now if you think about it, that doesn't really make sense. No one really takes them as Allah. You won't go to a random priest or to a monk, or a Christian or a Jew won't say that they're my Lord. They're not going to say that priest is my Lord, that rabbi is my Lord. They're not going to say that. They don't believe that. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say they took the rabbis and monks as their lords? Why? It's because whatever they made permissible. So if the rabbi or the priest said this is allowed, they followed it and they said that's allowed. If they said that's not allowed, they would follow it and say it's not allowed. That's what it means to worship. To worship means to obey and follow everything that person says, or that individual, or that idea, or for us it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To follow every single thing. Whatever He forbade, we stay away from it, and whatever He allowed, we keep it close to us and we keep on doing it, inshallah. That's the basics of worship. Not just understanding there's Allah. That's not what it is. Worshipping is making sure that your whole life, what's allowed and what's not allowed, is according to the thing that you're worshipping. For us, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we make sure that everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, we worship Him. And whatever He forbade, we forbade from ourselves, and what He allowed, we allow for ourselves. And then another phrase that I thought would help this as well is Rabi'a ibn Amir said, "Allah Azza wa Jal has sent us to deliver you from worshipping the creation to worshipping the Creator of the creation, and to deliver you from the constriction of this world to the vastness of this world and the afterlife, and from the oppression of their religions to the justice of Islam. Allah Azza wa Jal has sent us to save you from worshipping each other." So what you notice from this phrase is that, from this, and really, mashallah, is a very powerful phrase, is that Islam aims to take you away from this darkness, from this constriction of this world, this view that what's around me, what's in front of me, is my end goal, is with my whole world. But when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start learning more about Islam, you realize there's a much bigger goal than my life right now. There's a much bigger goal. What takes you away from the constrictions of this world to the vastness of this world and the hereafter. That's what the basics of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entails. And really, if you also take it a little more, because I really want to hit this point because it's so critical. At the very end, He said worshipping each other. And when we talked about beforehand, worshipping means to what? To whatever was forbade, we take that as forbidden for ourselves, and whatever is allowed, we take that as allowed for us. Now, let's say that you have a person that doesn't believe in God. I'll tell you that even though he doesn't believe in God, he still worships something. And that is another individual, another idea, another system. For example, an atheist, he doesn't worship. They say they don't worship anything, but what is his decision for what is good and what is bad? Either themselves, their morality, or they use science as their line, as their quote unquote their God, their worship. That's what entails worship. I really want to make this very clear. Worship is what your actions are defined on. What do you take as forbidden and what do you take as allowed? Now, the next ayah talks about Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which talks about the compassionate, the merciful, and which was said already in the very first ayah. It's continuously building that understanding that you have to understand this attribute of the compassion and merciful, because honestly, whenever an individual, a human being, is in a difficult situation, what is the very first thing they say? They look for what? They look for help. Say, Ya Allah, help me. Help me, I need some help. So the traits that are closest to us are the traits of compassion, of mercy. Because we are human, we will fall, we will be in tough situations. And to us, what really makes or breaks a good relationship, a person that you feel is really worthy of help, is a person that helps you in these difficult times. So when Allah emphasizes the traits of compassion, of mercy, He's trying to tell us that these feelings, that the top connection for this compassion and this for mercy should be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're in a difficult situation, go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one that gives you compassion and mercy. But also in the good times as well. Don't forget it. And honestly, that's more difficult. When you're having good times and you're not in difficulty, to continue to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another critical aspect. Now, the next ayah says, Maliki yawmiddin, Master of the Day of Judgment. And now this talks about another fundamental principle of Islam. One is one of the parts of Iman, is the belief in the hereafter. Belief that there is a Day of Judgment. And why is this so important? I'm going to give you a theoretical, just a question, a rhetorical question. Let's say a human doesn't believe in the Day of Judgment, right? He doesn't believe in the Day of Judgment. What becomes his goal and reason to live in this life? There wouldn't be, right? What reason would he have? What reason will he have in this life to continue on living, right? Or what reason past this world he's in? There's no goal. There would be no goal and objective. Because personally, if I was Muslim, I'm Muslim, right? What would push me so much to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to follow the Qur'an, the Sunnah, if there was no Day of Judgment? I'm not going to be held accountable. If there's no reward and there's no punishment, right? If that wasn't there, why would you even be here sitting down, right? Why would you be sitting down here and listening to this, tafsir? There wouldn't be a reason. Because there's no accountability, there's no Day of Judgment, there's no reward and punishment. And that's why it's so critical to understand that there will be a hereafter. You will be judged for your actions. And that's why take advantage of this very short time you have. And also you don't know how long this time is as well. Take advantage of that and make sure that you achieve the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you, not the punishment. And guess what? That reward or punishment will last eternity. So now, understanding the hereafter just gave us a whole goal and objective. It gave us another reason why we want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another reason why it makes it so important for us to understand what does He want, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want from us. It gave us another reason. That's why it's one of the pillars of Iman. One of the basic principles. And Iman means certainty. So we have to have certainty in the idea of the Day of Judgment. And again, if you don't have certainty in these ideas, strive to look for that certainty. It's very important. And then, now the next ayah talks about إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we turn for help. And this again is following based off the previous ayah that we talked about. about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, building on the idea of Tawheed, one of the basic principles of Islam, and also the definition of worship. What does it mean to worship? We already talked about that beforehand, to make sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only dictation of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And lastly, the last ayah says, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Guide us on the straight path, the path on those on whom you have bestowed your favors, not those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray. And with these ayat, these last two ayat, with these words, a believer, I'm going to read a short, it's kind of from the book that we're using, was in the shade of the Qur'an. Actually, I never brought that up before today. The main book that, sorry, this little side note, this is really important for this part. The main book that I use for this Qur'an inspiration and for the tafsirs is a book by Sayyid Qutb, which is in the shade of the Qur'an. It's a really good explanation on connecting to our lives. So I'm reading a small excerpt from his book because he does a really good job of explaining this ayah to us. And it says, with these words, a believer pleads to be shown the right way and to be helped along it, which cannot be achieved without Allah's guidance, care, and mercy. To acknowledge that is in itself a recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sovereignty and dominance over all things and events. And then he continues to say, guidance to the right way of life guarantees man's happiness in this world and in the hereafter. And it comes about in effect by what? By guiding human nature and man's instincts and desires and inspirations toward the recognition and the comprehension of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. So bringing human activity into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, not based off our desires, not always our whims and desires, however we want to. It gives us a path. It gives us, and literally, it gives us the cheat sheet. It gives us a road to follow. And it's very clear. If we're straying from that road, we know what's going to happen. But what's very clear is that if you stay on that road, stay on that path, it's also very clear what's going to happen for you. Inshallah, that'll be Jannah. So it defines, it gives us a clear-cut path on what we need to do. It gives us a clear-cut goal and objective in our life. It gives us something to live for. It gives us a purpose. So that's kind of, I took a lot of time. I know the session is advertised until 11:30, this is a very, very, very quick overview of Surah Al-Fatihah. You'll go online a lot and you actually listen to the tafsirs of Surah Al-Fatihah. They go on for 4 or 5 hours because of just how much you can learn from the surah. So I try to take a lot of the main points, but I always want to leave up the floor for any questions. Does anyone have any questions regarding the surah or any comments that you guys that I didn't bring up that you would find interesting to be said?